We were winning, Family Feud, the studio electric with our perfect family harmony, until my mother's eyes locked onto our wholesome opponent, Pastor John, and a 25-year-old lie began to unravel. The studio lights felt hotter than the California sun we'd left outside. They baked down on us, making my polyester shirt feel like it was melting to my skin. But I didn't care. I was living a dream. My family, me, my mom Sarah, my sister Chloe, and our cousins Mark and Jessica, were standing on the set of Family Feud, staring straight at the legend himself, Steve Harvey. The energy was electric, a pulsing, living thing that thrummed through the floorboards and up into my soul. We'd aced the first 2 rounds. We were a well-oiled machine, laughing, high-fiving, a perfect picture of familial harmony for the cameras. Our opponents, the Peterson family, were nice enough. A wholesome-looking crew from somewhere in the Midwest, led by their patriarch, a man named Pastor John. He had one of those kind, crinkly-eyed smiles that seemed to radiate gentle authority. His family, a wife and 3 grown kids, clearly adored him. Every time he got an answer right, they'd erupt in cheers of, "Way to go, Dad!" or "That's our pastor." It was almost sickeningly sweet, but in the heat of the game, it was just background noise. The first sign that something was wrong came during the 3rd round. The question was, name a reason a woman might fake a headache. My cousin Jessica buzzed in first, shouting, "To get out of doing chores!" The board dinged. Number 3 answer. We were on a roll. The board passed to Chloe, who nailed the number 1 answer, to avoid her husband. The audience roared with laughter. Steve did his classic double take, mugging for the camera. The energy was perfect. Then it was Mom's turn. Steve turned to her, his smile a mile wide. "All right, Mama Sarah. Give me something good." My mom just stood there for a second, her hand gripping the edge of the podium. I saw her knuckles were white. Her eyes weren't even on the board. They were locked on the other family, specifically on Pastor John. He was smiling politely, clapping along with his own family, but my mom was staring at him with an expression I'd never seen before. It was a cocktail of shock, fear, and something else I couldn't decipher. "Sarah?" Steve prompted gently, his smile wavering slightly. Mom blinked, as if waking from a trance. "Oh, she stammered, looking frantically at the board. "Flowers? To get flowers?" A huge red X flashed across the screen, accompanied by that brutal buzz-er sound. It was the first strike for our family. No big deal, it happens. But it was the way she said it. Her voice was thin, reedy. I glanced over at her. Her face, usually so warm and expressive, was pale and tight. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. During the commercial break, I leaned over. "Hey, you okay, Mom?" "You seem a little rattled." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, honey. Just the lights, I guess. It's a lot of pressure." I wanted to believe her, but my gut was screaming that something was off. My mom was the rock of our family. She'd raised me and Chloe on her own after our dad died in a car crash before we were even born. She was the strongest person I knew. Nerves on a game show? It just didn't track. For the rest of the round, she was a ghost, offering weak, nonsensical answers that led to 2 more strikes. The Petersons stole the points, and suddenly the game was uncomfortably close. We headed into the final round before fast money, the score practically tied. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. This was it. Winner take all. Steve, ever the professional, built up the drama. "All right, people, this is for the whole shebang. The winner of this round goes on to play for $20,000. The question appeared on the board. Name something a new father is scared to do for the first time. My sister Chloe buzzed in so fast she almost fell over. Change a diaper! Bing! Number one answer. The studio exploded. We were back in it. I gave the second answer. Give the baby a bath. Bing! We were flying. One by one, we picked off the answers on the board, holding the baby's head, burping them, cutting their tiny fingernails. Only one answer remained. It was Mom's turn again. All she had to do was name one more thing. Anything. The most obscure, bottom-of-the-barrel answer would win us the game. The camera zoomed in on her face, and once again, I saw it. That same terrified, vacant stare fixed on Pastor John Peterson. He was standing with his family, a placid smile on his face, but it felt like there was an invisible line of energy stretching across the stage, connecting him and my mother. An ancient, invisible wound. "Mama Sarah," Steve said, his voice soft, almost concerned. "Take your time." One answer left on the board. What is a new father scared to do for the first time? Mom opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her gaze was locked on the pastor. Her lips trembled. The 10-second timer started its ominous countdown on the screen. 9, 8, 7. "Mom!" I hissed, trying to snap her out of it. "Just say anything." Leave them alone in a room. 6, 5, 4. Her eyes welled up with tears. A single tear tracked a path through her foundation. 3, 2, 1. Buzzer! The sound was like a gunshot in the silent studio. Our third strike. The game was no longer in our hands. My heart sank into my stomach. Chloe and Jessica groaned in frustration. I just stared at my mom, who looked like she was about to shatter into a million pieces. Steve tried to smooth it over. Tough one, tough one. Don't you worry, Williams family. Petersons, you got a chance to steal, a chance to go to fast money. Pastor John, I'm coming to you. One answer on the board. If it's up there, your family plays for $20,000. Name something a new father is scared to do for the first time. Pastor John beamed, stepping forward. He had this easy charisma that made you want to listen to him. "Well, Steve," he began, his voice smooth and calming, like a Sunday sermon. "I think the number one thing a new father, a good father, is scared of is failing them, just letting them down." The audience let out a collective "aw." It was a cheesy, sentimental answer. There was no way it was on the board. Steve Harvey paused, soaking in the moment. "Letting them down. Pastor, that's a beautiful thought. But is it up there? Survey says." He turned to the board. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a triumphant bing, the final answer lit up. "Leave them." The Petersons erupted. They were screaming, hugging, jumping up and down. My family stood in stunned, disappointed silence. We had lost. But I wasn't watching the celebrating family. I was watching my mother. She had her hand over her mouth, and she was shaking, her eyes screwed shut as if trying to block out a nightmare. Steve went over to congratulate the Petersons. He shook Pastor John's hand. "Congratulations, Pastor." "Great answer. You're a family man, I can tell. You must be proud of these wonderful kids you raised." Pastor John smiled, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He glanced at his cheering family, then his gaze drifted across the stage. It passed over my cousins, my sister, and me, before landing, with laser-like intensity, on my mother. The studio noise seemed to fade into a dull roar in my ears. I am proud, Steve, the pastor said, his voice suddenly heavy, carrying a weight that silenced his own family's celebration. I try every day to be the father that I wasn't always. Steve, confused by the sudden shift in tone, tilted his head. What do you mean by that, Pastor? The man took a deep breath, his folksy charm completely gone, replaced by a raw, painful gravity. He never broke eye contact with my mom, who was now staring back at him, frozen, tears streaming down her face. I mean, Pastor John said, his voice cracking, loud enough for every microphone to pick it up. That I have other children, Steve. Children I failed a long, long time ago. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Steve Harvey's professional smile completely vanished. He looked from the pastor's tormented face to my mother's tear-streaked one. A horrifying understanding began to dawn on his face, and on mine. This wasn't about the game anymore. Hold on, Steve said, holding up a hand, his voice sharp and serious, cutting through the studio buzz. Stop the music. Stop the clock. Pastor, what are you talking about? Pastor John finally tore his gaze away from my mom and looked directly at my sister Chloe, and then at me. He looked at us with an agonizing mix of regret and sorrow that I couldn't comprehend. Their father didn't die in a car accident, he said, his voice echoing in the dead-silent studio. He just drove away. He turned back to Steve, his face ashen. I'm their father, Steve. I'm Sarah's husband, and I am Alex and Chloe's father. The world didn't so much stop as it did shatter. The bright, cheerful bing of the game board felt like it had happened in another lifetime. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the multi-million-dollar television studio was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Every camera, every audience member, every crew person was frozen, their gazes ricocheting between the man calling himself Pastor John and my mother, who was now openly sobbing, her body trembling so violently I thought she would collapse. My mind was a screaming void. Father? The word was alien. My father was a black-and-white photograph on my mom's bedside table. A hero who died too young. A story of tragic love we were raised on. This man with his kind pastor smile and his ready-made family from a catalog. This was impossible. A sick joke, a ratings stunt. It had to be. Then Chloe let out a sound, a wounded, guttural cry that ripped through the silence. "What did you say?" she screamed, her voice cracking with fury and disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Steve Harvey, to his immense credit, snapped into action. The game show host vanished, replaced by a man taking control of a crisis. "Cut! Cut the cameras now!" he boomed, his voice carrying an authority I'd never heard from him. He waved his hands frantically. "Somebody get the music off! We're on a hard break, people. Hard break." The cheerful Family Feud theme song sputtered and died. The studio lights dimmed, plunging us into a weird, surreal twilight. Producers and stagehands began swarming, speaking into headsets, their movements urgent and confused. But I couldn't see any of them. I could only see my mother. Her legs gave out from under her, and she crumpled to the floor, her hands covering her face as a lifetime of grief and secrets poured out of her in ragged sobs. I lunged forward, catching her before her head could hit the podium. "Mom! Mom, look at me!" I begged, my own voice shaking. "What is he talking about?" "It's not true, right?" She couldn't answer. She was gone, lost in a storm that had been brewing for 25 years. Across the stage, the Peterson family looked like they'd been struck by lightning. The wife, his wife, was staring at him, her face a mask of pale, horrified confusion. His children were looking back and forth between us and him, their celebratory smiles curdled into expressions of shock. "Dad?" one of his sons asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What is going on?" Paramedics, summoned from somewhere in the studio labyrinth, rushed onto the stage. As they knelt beside my mom, trying to get her to respond, Steve Harvey was by my side. He put a firm, grounding hand on my shoulder. "Son, we're going to get you all backstage. To a private room. We'll take care of your mother." I just nodded, my brain numb. As they helped my mom to her feet, I chanced to look across the stage. My eyes met his. The man who called himself Pastor John. The man who claimed to be my father. The kind, crinkly smile was gone. In its place was the face of a ghost, a man haunted and broken, his eyes pleading with me for what? Forgiveness? Understanding? I felt a surge of pure, cold hatred that was so intense it almost made me sick. He took a step toward us, his hand outstretched. "Sarah," he breathed. "Get away from her!" I snarled, stepping between them. My entire body was vibrating with rage. "Don't you dare come near her!" Steve Harvey, gently but firmly, steered me and Chloe away, while producers created a human wall between our two families. They led us through a maze of corridors into a sterile, quiet green room. The moment the door closed, Chloe erupted. "This is a lie! He's a liar! A crazy person! Mom, tell him it's a lie!" she pleaded, turning to our mother, who had been helped onto a small sofa. Mom just shook her head, not in denial, but in a gesture of pure, abject despair. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen, and finally met my gaze. In their depths, I saw the confirmation I was dreading. The lie wasn't his. The lie was the one we had been living our entire lives. There was a soft knock on the door before it opened. Steve Harvey came in alone, holding 3 bottles of water. He looked exhausted, the weight of the situation etched onto his face. He handed us the water and pulled up a chair, sitting opposite our mother. "Sarah," he said, his voice incredibly gentle, "I am so sorry. We've paused the entire production. The other family is in another room. Nobody is going anywhere until you all are ready. But I have to ask you, I have to know, is what that man said, is it true?" The room was silent, save for my mother's quiet weeping. She took a shaky breath, twisting a crumpled tissue in her hands. She nodded once, a small, jerking motion. My world tilted on its axis. It was true, all of it, the photograph, the story of the car crash. Our entire history was a fabrication. "His name," my mother whispered, her voice a raw, shredded thing. "His name isn't John Peterson." She looked up, her eyes burning with a pain so old and deep it seemed ancient. "His name is Daniel Williams. He is your father, and he didn't die. He just left." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Daniel Williams, a name I had never heard, yet it was supposed to be mine. A tidal wave of questions crashed over me. Why? Why lie to us? Why did he leave? Who were these other people? An inferno of rage ignited in my chest, burning away the shock and the grief. It was a pure, clarifying fire. I had to see him. I had to face the man who had ghosted our lives and built a new one on the ashes of ours. Without a word, I stood up and walked to the door. "Alex, wait!" Chloe cried out. "Son, maybe you should just take a minute," Steve Harvey said, standing up. But I didn't listen. I yanked the door open and stormed out into the hallway. I didn't know where I was going, but my fury was a compass. I saw a security guard standing outside a door down the hall, and I knew that's where they were. As I got closer, the door opened, and his other son, a guy who looked about my age, with the same jawline I saw in the mirror every morning, stepped out, his face pale and angry. He saw me approaching, and his eyes narrowed. Before he could speak, I looked past him, into the room, and I saw him. Daniel Williams. He was standing there, his wife weeping in a chair while he tried to comfort her. He looked up and saw me, and his face crumbled. I took a step toward the doorway, my hands clenched into fists. I was going to say his name. I was going to scream it. But before I could, his son stepped directly in my path, blocking my way. He puffed out his chest, his expression a mixture of fear and belligerence, a loyal child defending his world from the monster at the door. "You need to leave," he spat, his voice trembling with rage. "You've done enough." "Stay away from my father." The words, "my father," hung in the air between us, a declaration of war. Here he was, this stranger who shared my blood, defending the man who had been a ghost to me my entire life. The sheer, blinding absurdity of it sent a fresh wave of fury through me. "Your father?" I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the sterile hallway. "He stopped being just your father about 25 years ago. Now get out of my way." I tried to push past him, but he held his ground, shoving me back with a surprising amount of force. "I said, stay away from him," he yelled, his face turning red. "Look what you've done." "You've ruined everything." "I've ruined everything?" I was screaming now, all pretense of control gone. "Your father built his perfect little life on a graveyard. My graveyard. My sister's graveyard. I have a right to talk to him." From inside the room, I heard Daniel's voice, pleading. "Joshua, stop it. Just let him in." But Joshua wasn't listening. We were two planets locked in a collision course, and the man who created us was just a spectator. We shoved each other again, a pathetic, clumsy scuffle fueled by a quarter-century of lies. Studio security guards, who had been hovering nearby, finally moved in, pulling us apart. They held me back, my arms pinned, as I thrashed and yelled, my eyes still locked on the man in the room. And for the first time, I saw him clearly, not as a pastor, not as a game show contestant, but as a coward. He was hiding behind his new son, his new life, letting a boy fight a battle he should have been fighting for decades. Steve Harvey appeared at my side, his presence a calming force in the chaos. "All right, that's enough," he said firmly, speaking to the guards. "Let him go. Let's all just take a breath." He turned to me, his expression a mixture of pity and sternness. "Alex, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this isn't the way." He then looked past me, his gaze falling on Daniel, who was now standing in the doorway, his son Joshua still protectively at his side. "And you," Steve said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that held all the power of his stage presence. "You have got a hell of a lot of explaining to do. I've cleared a conference room. No producers, no cameras, no security, just the two families. It's time to talk." Walking into that conference room felt like stepping into an execution chamber. The air was thick and heavy, vibrating with unspoken accusations and raw pain. My mom and Chloe were already there, sitting on one side of a long, polished table. My mom looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, completely hollowed out. Chloe just looked furious, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes like chips of ice. A moment later, the other family entered. Daniel, I couldn't bring myself to call him Pastor John anymore. His wife, who I now knew was named Mary, and their 3 children, Joshua, Rachel, and David. They looked like a family portrait that had been set on fire. Mary's eyes were red and puffy, and she refused to look at any of us, staring intently at the wood grain of the table. Their kids looked shell-shocked, glancing between their father and us as if trying to solve an impossible equation. They sat down on the opposite side of the table. The chasm between us felt 1,000 miles wide. For a full minute nobody spoke. The silence was a living entity filled with the ghosts of what-ifs and the crushing weight of what was. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. His voice, when he spoke, was a shadow of the confident, charming man from the stage. "Sarah," he began, his eyes fixed on my mother. I don't know what to say." My mother flinched as if he'd struck her. She didn't look up. "You don't know what to say?" Chloe spat, her voice dripping with venom. "How about, 'I'm sorry for pretending to be dead'? How about, 'I'm sorry for letting you think our dad was a hero when he was really just a coward who ran away'?" Daniel winced. "I know. I deserve all of that." "Why?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. It was the only word I could manage to push past the lump in my throat. "Just why?" He finally looked at me, really looked at me. It was like seeing my own face in a distorted mirror, the same dark hair, the same shape of the eyes. Seeing the genetic proof in front of me made the betrayal feel even deeper. "I was a kid," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I was 21 when you were born, Alex. 22 when Chloe was on the way. I was terrified. I wasn't a man of God then. I was just a scared, stupid boy who was in over his head. I didn't have a job. I had no prospects. I panicked." "You panicked?" my mom said, finally looking up. Her voice was pure ice. "You panicked, so you packed a bag in the middle of the night, took the only money we had, and disappeared off the face of the earth." "I thought you'd be better off," he choked out, tears beginning to stream down his face. "I thought you'd all be better off without me dragging you down. I told myself it was the most selfless thing I could do. I drove for 3 days, ended up in Oklahoma, and I just started over. I changed my name. I met Mary. I found God." "You found God?" I scoffed. "Does he know where you've been? Does he approve of abandoning your children?" "Don't you talk to my father like that," Joshua snapped from across the table. "He's my father too," I roared back, "and I'll talk to him however I want. Stop it, all of you." It was Mary, Daniel's wife. She had been silent until now, but her voice cut through the anger like a knife. She was looking at her husband, her face a mess of tears and betrayal. "You told me your first wife died. You told me she died in a car crash with her brother. You told me you didn't have any children." The confession hung in the air, another layer of deceit in a story built entirely of them. He hadn't just lied to us. He had erased us. He had built this entire second life, this pillar of the community persona, on my mother's fake grave. My mother made a strangled noise and stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over. "I can't do this. I can't be in this room." She turned and fled, her sobs echoing behind her. Chloe shot a look of pure hatred at Daniel before rushing out after her. I was left alone on our side of the table, facing this family that shouldn't exist. My family. Daniel looked utterly defeated, a man watching 2 worlds he had desperately tried to keep separate collide and burn. "I need to go to her," I said, my voice hollow. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I couldn't look at any of them anymore. As I turned to leave, Daniel's voice stopped me. "Alex, wait," he pleaded. "Please." I paused at the door, my back to him. I didn't turn around. "I know I can never fix this," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "But I have to try. There's so much you don't know. There's a reason I came on this show. It wasn't a coincidence we were matched up against you." My blood ran cold. I slowly turned back to face him, a new, horrifying suspicion dawning on me. His face was a mask of desperate confession, his eyes begging me to understand. "I arranged it," he whispered, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've been following your mother online for years. I saw her post about auditioning. I pulled strings through my church network. I had to see you. I had to see you all again." He took a shaky breath, his next words hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "And there's something else you need to know. Something about the night I left. It wasn't just about me being scared. The world, which had already shattered once that day, fractured into even smaller pieces." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice dangerously low. "What else is there?" Daniel looked at his wife, Mary, whose face was now a pale mask of shock. He looked at his children, whose entire understanding of their father was being dismantled in real time. Then his eyes settled on me, filled with a shame so profound it seemed to suck the very air from the room. "The night I left," he began, his voice cracking. "Your mother, she told me to go." I stared at him, my mind refusing to process the words. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No. She loved you. She mourned you my entire life. She would never—" "She did," he insisted, his voice gaining a desperate urgency. "We had a terrible fight. The worst we'd ever had. I was failing you all. I'd lost another job. We were about to be evicted. She was pregnant with Chloe and terrified. She screamed at me. She told me I was useless, that she'd have been better off if I'd never been born. And then she said it. She said, 'Just go. Get out of our lives. We'll be better off without you.'" He took a ragged breath. "I was a coward, Alex. A weak, scared boy. And I took the out she gave me. I convinced myself I was doing what she wanted, that I was setting her free. It was a lie I told myself for 25 years to justify the worst thing I ever did." I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. This didn't fit the narrative. It didn't fit the story of the saintly, grieving widow my mother had been. I stumbled out of the conference room, my head spinning, and found my mom and Chloe in the hallway, huddled together. "Mom," I said, my voice hoarse, "he said you told him to leave." My mother froze. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the wall, her expression shuttered. And in her silence, I found the last devastating piece of the truth. She hadn't been a widow mourning a dead hero. She'd been a woman consumed by the guilt of a single angry sentence that had cost her everything. The story of the car crash wasn't just to protect us from the pain of abandonment, it was to protect herself from the shame of her own part in it. The next hour was a blur of raw, painful honesty. We went back into the room, not as two opposing families, but as a collection of broken people trying to make sense of the wreckage. My mom, her voice barely a whisper, admitted it was true. She'd been young, scared, and had said things in the heat of a moment she never truly meant. She never dreamed he would actually leave. Every day for 25 years, she had woken up regretting those words. Daniel, in turn, confessed everything. He explained how the guilt had eaten him alive, how he'd found God, but could never find true peace because he knew he had 2 children in the world who thought he was dead. He admitted he'd been a coward for not coming back, for being too afraid of what he would find. Seeing my mom's audition post for Family Feud felt like a sign, a last desperate chance to see our faces, even if it was just from across a stage. He never intended to reveal himself, but seeing my mother, hearing the question about a father's fear, the dam of his decades-long secret had finally broken. There were no easy resolutions. Mary, his wife, was devastated. Her marriage built on a foundation of lies. His children were looking at their father like he was a stranger. Chloe was still radiating a cold fury, her entire childhood a lie she couldn't yet forgive. And me? I felt empty. The hatred that had fueled me was gone, replaced by a profound, aching sadness for all of us. For the scared kids they were, for the broken adults they became, and for the children caught in the fallout. The show, of course, was canceled. The producers, looking pale and shaken, arranged for transportation. They offered counseling, legal resources, anything we needed. As we prepared to leave, Daniel approached me one last time. His other family stood a few feet behind him, a fractured unit. "Alex," he said, his eyes pleading, "I know 'I'm sorry' isn't enough. It will never be enough. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I want a chance, someday, to maybe get to know you. And Chloe, if you'll let me." I looked at this man, this stranger who shared my DNA. He wasn't the demon I had imagined, nor was he the hero from the photograph. He was just a man, flawed and weak, who had made a catastrophic mistake and had lived with it every single day. "I don't know," I said honestly, the words feeling heavy and true. "I don't know if I can ever see you as my father." "Right now I can't, but—" I took a breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was cutting my lungs. "My mom deserves to not carry this anymore, and you owe her a lifetime of apologies. Start there." I turned and walked away, joining my mom and Chloe. The ride back to the hotel was silent. There was nothing left to say. The lies had been burned away, and all that remained was the raw, scorched truth. Weeks turned into months. There were calls, tentative, awkward conversations. Daniel and my mother spoke for hours, unpacking 25 years of pain and regret. He started sending letters, not to me, but to my mom, which she would leave on the kitchen table for me and Chloe to read if we wanted. They were filled with stories of his life before he left, memories of when they were happy, and endless gut-wrenching apologies. His other family didn't implode. Mary, a woman of incredible strength and faith, didn't leave him. They started intense therapy, both as a couple and with their children. I even got a short, stilted email from Joshua one day. It just said, "I'm sorry. I hope we can talk someday." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. There was no grand, happy reunion. We didn't suddenly become one big, blended family. Life isn't a game show with a neat and tidy ending. But slowly, imperceptibly, something began to shift. The gaping wound in our family, the one that had been secretly festering for a generation, was finally exposed to the air. And for the first time, it had a chance to heal. The photograph by my mom's bed is gone now. In its place, there isn't anything yet. The space is empty, waiting, not for a hero or a ghost, but for something real. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough.